All right, so here we go, continuing on our evangelism project. We have been working for a long time now on you guys getting comfortable with the actual information that needs to be shared for a good gospel presentation. Tonight we're going to move a horrible life situation. Like, she really is in a tough spot. She's in her late 30s, a 20-year relationship with this kind of no-good guy who's an alcoholic, and they have a 15-year-old child they lost custody of, and yet she's living with the dad in another place, and it's not a safe situation. And so this mom is grieving that, and she's trying to help, and she doesn't have much wherewithal to help. She's having trouble taking care of herself, but her heart's just broken. So in this conversation, she's just really distraught. And so gave some practical advice. Advise you to always do that. If there's some practical advice you can share with somebody, hey, try this. Have you tried this? Have you tried this? Just real things to do. But inevitably in those conversations at some point you need to ask the question, hey, do you have any spiritual beliefs to turn to for help with this? And if they say no, then you say, I ask because I'm a Christian, so I have Jesus. And so anytime I am struggling, anytime I need wisdom or I need a miracle, like, I always have him to turn to and ask for help. When I asked her that question, she actually said yes. I went to church for a long time. I actually went to Christian school when I was a kid. And I said, that's not what I asked. I said, forget church and all that for a second. I'm talking about Jesus. Do you know Jesus? Well, yeah, I told you. I used to go to church all the time, and I can't go to church now because the other guy's family goes to the two churches in this small town, and so I'm not really comfortable going there. I said, I understand what you're saying, but that's not what I'm talking about. I'm talking about Jesus. Do you feel like you know Jesus? Like, can you just talk to him? Do you feel his presence in your life? And she really didn't. I said, if I asked you to explain the gospel, could you do that? That's always kind of my barometer, because that's how I realized I wasn't saved when I was in my early 20s. I had made a profession of faith 10 years before, but in my early 20s I realized I couldn't literally explain the gospel to somebody, so I knew I wasn't legit, and so I used that, and she couldn't. She said, no, I don't think I can. I said, okay, if I share it with you real quick. I gave her the exact minute 15-second gospel that I share with you guys that I use if it's a real quick situation. And when I was done, she said, wow, I have never heard that before. Let that sink in. She went to Christian school and church most of her life. She's in her late 30s, and she had never heard just the gospel. That is way more common than you know. That's not fair. I don't know the percentages. A lot of the people that you run into in the Bible Belt, which, listen, there's one of the takeaway phrases we heard at the conference we just came back from. There was a pastor that came from another part of the country to plant a church in the South, and he said, I thought I was going to the Bible Belt. What I found out was I was going to the church belt, not necessarily the Bible Belt. So there are a lot of people walking around out here that believe they are Christians. They're not lying. They think they are Christians because they go to church, because they've always gone to church, because their family has always gone to church. You need to ask the next question, but do you know Jesus? I'm not talking about church. I'm not talking about religion. Do you know Jesus? I love church. We'll talk about church later, but do you know Jesus? Do you understand the gospel? And you need to be ready to share it with excitement and joy, because I'm telling you, she said, wow, I've never heard that before. That sounds wonderful. And she made a profession of faith, and her entire demeanor changed. We talked for a long time after that. She never mentioned any of her problems again. Nothing in her situation has changed. She never mentioned that stuff anymore. She only wanted to know about Jesus. And he will get her through the problems. Okay? So just keep that in mind. That's why we're doing this stuff. That's why we're spending so much time. We've been doing this for months now. Why? Because this is the part that matters. I want you guys to be really well-fed sheep. I want you to know the Bible. We will go back to doing Bible studies on Wednesday nights. But none of that really matters if we're not a vessel for the truth to reach out to people. And so I'm trying to do my job, equip the saints for the work of the ministry. So to go along with that, about 20 minutes worth of video here. If you have any questions, jot them down. Anything sticks out to you, jot that down. We're going to talk about it a little bit after. Okay, this is by Greg Kokel. He's a well-known, kind of famous apologist guy, a lot of YouTube stuff. He does a lot of debates, a lot of interviews. Okay, so he's well-versed on the technical side of speaking to non-believers especially. About Jesus and about things like that. So we're going to try to glean some things. I'll tell you up front, there's one thing that he talks about that I don't like the way it's not that he's wrong necessarily, but I don't like the way he said it. So I put that bug in here to see if you can pick out what it is. Okay, we'll see if we agree afterwards. Maybe we'll have 20 things that we don't like. I don't know. But I want to see if anybody picks up on the part that bothered me. Okay, so Kirk, we ready? All right. All right.
With Stand to Reason. And first of all, welcome to the class. I am thrilled that you're taking this class for a very important reason. I think you may very well look back on this particular time that you've spent with me and this tactics class as a turning point in your life. That is, as a time when everything changed for you in the way you engage other people about the gospel of Christ. This is what happened to me 10 or 15 years ago when I began to use these tactics more effectively. And I have taught this to thousands of people, literally. And everywhere I go, people come back to me and they tell me, this changed my life. This training, this teaching, this approach to engaging people with the claims of Christ has absolutely changed my life. So I have a great expectation that this is going to be the same for you. And so I encourage you, don't miss a single session if you're going to do this as a group. It's that important. Now, the reason that you're going to be a different person, things are going to change for you because of this course, is because I'm going to provide for you something that has been missing in your training so far. I get a chance to speak at a lot of conferences. There are conferences where a lot of people go to them and a lot of smart guys are doing the teaching, okay? And they bring lots and lots of good information, and that's fabulous. We need it. And in fact, there's hardly a challenge that has been made on Christianity that hasn't been addressed by some really thoughtful person and dealt with, so we don't have to be afraid of anything. But there's a problem with these conferences, and the problem is well, it reminds me of the Far Side cartoon where the guy's at a class and it's a math class and all the equations are on the board and the student raises his hand and it says, "Professor, can I please be excused? My brain is full." You ever had that situation where you're just overwhelmed with all of the information? It's great the information that's being given, but there's something missing. And the thing that's missing is a bridge from the content to the conversation, a bridge from the scholarship to the relationship. How do you take all of that stuff that you've been learning and get it in play in a productive way in a conversation? And that is the missing piece that I want to give you in our time together. So here's what I have in mind for our first session together. First, I want to define tactics. I want to tell you what they are, how they're used, and I want to warn you about a danger in using a tactical approach, okay? The second thing that I want to do is I want to suggest a significant change in the way you approach what we usually call evangelism, okay? A different way of looking at it. The third thing I want to do is I want to introduce you to the first and the most powerful apologetics tactic, the one that really is the very core of our game plan. And what I'd like to accomplish in the process is not to just give you more information. I want to make a contribution in your life to help produce a certain type of person. Now, I call that an ambassador for Christ. An ambassador for Christ is somebody who has three essential skills. First of all, they know some things. Every ambassador has to have a basic knowledge of the thing that the sovereign wants to communicate through that ambassador, okay? So they need knowledge, an accurately informed mind, okay? But it's not just enough to have the knowledge. They have to have a means of communicating that knowledge that is effective. So I call that wisdom, an artful method. But if you have the knowledge and you have the method, but it turns out you're a drunk or a womanizer or just plain rude, you can see now how a person's character is going to undermine the message. So the third issue is character. You have to have an attractive manner. This course focuses in principally on the second element of being a good ambassador, the tactical skill of engaging people in conversation. So let me pause for a moment and talk about the difference between tactics and strategy. You hear these terms being used in military circumstances and conversations and the like. There is a difference between the two of them, and especially as we engage other people with the claims of Christ, we want to think of these two different things. A strategy kind of involves the big picture. And the way I look at that with regards to our circumstance as Christians is the big picture involves all of the information that we have to make our case. Whether we are defending against a challenge to Christianity, we call that sometimes defensive apologetics or negative apologetics, if you will, or whether we're making a positive case for Christianity, and some call that positive apologetics, in either case, we have the goods. We have the best content, the best information, we have the best worldview, the one that makes the best sense of reality. And so we have the goods. That's the big picture. But how do we get the goods into play in a conversation with people? And this is what I was talking about a few moments ago when I talked about the bridge. This is where tactics come in. Because tactics, simply put, are about how we take those resources that we have at our disposal and we put them into play to maneuver in conversations. Now, I got to offer a warning here because there is a downside here. These tactics are very, very powerful. That means that you can use these tactics if you have ill will to make people look foolish and stupid and that kind of thing. And this isn't the purpose. The tactics are not tricks. They are not slick ruses. They are not clever ploys to destroy non-Christians or force them to submit to your own point of view. They are not attempts to belittle or humiliate or to gain notches in our spiritual belts. This is not what we're about. This is not our spirit here. Okay? Instead, what I am teaching you are tactical maneuvers and conversations that will actually help you to manage the conversation, not to manipulate people. It'll help control the circumstances that you're in, not coerce people. We're not forcing our views. We're offering arguments. We're seeking to persuade people. Okay? We want to finesse them, not fight with them. All right? We want to use our tactics to maneuver and navigate through the minefields that we invariably are going to encounter when we're talking with other people about our convictions. Basically, the point of the tactical approach is to put you in the driver's seat. Okay, we'll revisit that notion a number of times, but I want to teach you a technique that will allow you to stay in the driver's seat yourself. So now we know what tactics are and what they're not. And I want to talk next about an insight that has completely changed my approach to conversation with other people. A number of years ago, after having, long seasons of frustrating engagements with others, it became clear to me that I was using the wrong approach. And the insight that helped me out here was simply this. Before there can be any harvest, there's always got to be a season of, let's just call it gardening, okay? And this is so important, I want to repeat it. Before there can be any harvest, there always has to be a season of gardening. And you think about it, virtually no one anymore goes from 0 to 60 overnight. They don't get introduced to the gospel and then become a Christian right away. That almost never happens, especially in our communities right now. Those kinds of important decisions take lots of time. And I want you to think about what Jesus said in John chapter 4. This is the woman at the well, and it's a very popular passage, and it's a great conversation Jesus has. But sometimes we miss what he said afterwards. And in fact, it was about a year and a half I was reading this passage, and all of a sudden it jumped out to me. This other part and how well it fit into what I'm talking about here. Jesus had talked to the woman at the well. She went off to Sychar to tell everybody what this man had told her, bring them to see him. The disciples came. They were out getting food. Jesus says to them, you are about to reap where you did not sow. In other words, there are other people who did the heavy lifting. You're going to get the easy pickings. He said, And in fact, he said, you say there are 6 months or 4 months, and then comes the harvest. He said, look, the field is ripe for harvest, and he's probably indicating that particular field. I don't think he meant that every field is always ripe for harvest, but that field was. And he's probably referring to the white robes coming across the field right then, being led by the woman at the well. And then he says this, so that the one who reaps and the one who sows can rejoice together. Do you see that? There are two different kinds of workers. There are sowers and there are reapers. There are two different seasons. There are sowing, gardening, if you will, and reaping. But there's one team. And frankly, when I look back at my life, I realize that I've really been a gardener most of my life, whether it was with radio or TV interviews or lectures or what I do in my public presentations. I'm gardening. I'm not harvesting. That's not my skill. And some of you are frustrated because you realize, boy, harvesting is what it's all about. That's what you think. That's the model of evangelism that we've received. But we're in a period of our time now where people need a lot more time during the gardening phase before they're ripe and ready to harvest. And when they're ready, of course, the harvest is easy because you bump up against the fruit and it drops into the basket. That's simple. The hard work is in the gardening. And since we probably need more gardeners than we need more harvesters, chances are pretty good that you are not a harvester, you're a gardener. And you've been frustrated because you're not a good harvester, you're not good at closing the deal. It makes you nervous, and I understand that. And so you sit on the bench, and you're not involved. You didn't realize that maybe you're just a gardener, and that's the role that you play. Harvesting is easy when the fruit is ripe. It's part of our job, as is part of our team, to do the gardening. Okay? So I'm a gardener. I'm not a harvester. I suspect most of you are as well. And as such, understanding that there's always a season of gardening that's necessary before the harvest, I have modified my own goal. My goal when I go out is not to try to win that person to Christ. It may not even be to get to the gospel, because sometimes there's all kinds of stuff that have to be dealt with before people will take the gospel seriously. I have a different goal, and I encourage you to adopt the same goal. Now, what is that goal? So whenever I speak to a non-Christian audience, I have a different goal in mind, and I let them know this goal right up front. I say to them, I'm here tonight because my life has been deeply changed by an ancient teacher. His name is Jesus of Nazareth. And 40 years ago or so, when I was a student at UCLA, I began to think about the claims that Jesus made about himself, about the nature of the world, and the claims that he made on my own life. And I began to ask a lot of questions. I even pushed back quite a bit too. But finally, I came to the conclusion that Jesus got it right. This is what I tell him. And so I began to follow him. Now I say, I'm not here today to convert you. That's not my goal. I just want to put a stone in your shoe. I just want to annoy you in a good way. And they all start laughing when I say this because they expect the Christian to annoy them. So I say, okay, I'm your guy, but you're going to thank me for it. I just want you walking out of the auditorium tonight, kind of something I said bothering you, sticking at you. I want you to see that Christianity is worth thinking about. And if I can put that stone in their shoe in the lecture that follows, then I'm happy. I'm going to do a little gardening because I know that we got a whole team of people and a lot of them are gardeners. And I'm going to do a little, you do a little, others do a little, and then when the fruit is ready to be harvested, God's going to bring a harvester, somebody who's capable, into their life to accomplish that particular goal. So what I want you to do is I want you to think about changing your goal, not to get them to sign on the dotted line, but just to do a little gardening, just to put a stone in their shoe. Okay? But I have something that you don't have that makes all the difference. I have a game plan. And that's the game plan that I would like to share with you during this course. And here's the promise that I'm going to give you. In this course, I am going to give you a game plan that will allow you to converse with confidence in any situation, no matter how little you know, or how knowledgeable or aggressive or even obnoxious the other person may be. okay? It's a game plan that I order in a very particular way to make it simple to follow, yet is tailor-made for each individual. It follows Paul's directions in Colossians chapter 4, verse 5 and 6. And here's what he says there. He says, conduct yourselves with wisdom towards outsiders, making the most of the opportunity. So first he says, be smart, all right? Second, he says, let your speech always be with grace, seasoned as it were with salt. Be nice. How about that? Be smart, be nice. What a concept. Third thing he says, so that you know how to respond to each person. In other words, be tactical. Be smart, be nice, be tactical. Now let me give you an example of what I mean about employing this kind of tactical approach, trying to put a stone in someone's shoe, not going for the gold, but following Paul's advice there in Colossians chapter 4. A number of years ago, I was having a conversation with a young lady in a film place. My wife and I, this is before our digital days, we were having some film produced, and I noticed that there was a pentagram hanging from her neck. Now, a pentagram is a 5-pointed star. It's usually an occultic symbol, but I wasn't exactly sure what it meant for her, so I asked her. I said, does that jewelry have religious significance? And she said, yes, it does. The 5 points stand for earth, wind, fire, water, and spirit. So, okay, I've heard this before. I wanted to know whether it really had religious significance for her, and I asked her that question. She said, yes, I'm a pagan. Now, I'm a trained professional, so I'm, cool and calm. My wife never heard that before. When she heard the lady refer to herself as a pagan, my wife started to chuckle, and then she caught herself, and she said, I'm sorry, I didn't mean to be rude. I just never heard anybody admit it before. She'd only heard the word pagan used when her girlfriends would call their kids in, get in here, a bunch of pagans kind of thing. But the woman wasn't offended. She said, well, no, this is a earth religion. And she began to explain how in her earth religion, they respect nature and life and the like. And I realized at the moment I was talking probably to a witch. And so I asked her, are you Wiccan? And she said, yes, I am. And then repeated this notion about respecting all life. Now, I know a little bit about witchcraft, and they do respect life, and that means that most of the time they're pro-life with regards to the abortion issue. So I asked her that. Are you pro-life with regards to the abortion issue? She said, no, I'm pro-choice. I said, isn't that a little bit unusual for a witch to be pro-choice? And she said, yeah, it is. And then she said this. She said, I know I could never do that, referring to abortion. I could never kill a baby. Now, those were her words. Now, at Stand to Reason, we have training material about abortion, and we train people to make the case that abortion kills an innocent human being, baby killing if you like, but we don't use that kind of language. Because we don't want people to think we're advancing our case by using slick rhetoric, baby killer, that kind of thing. But now I'm not the one who is using that language. It's the witch who is the pro-choicer who's identifying abortion as baby killing. And one thing I hope that you get out of our sessions together is you get the conviction that you have to listen to what people say, because they're going to give you stuff you can use, and I'm listening. So am I going to use the word abortion anymore as we continue this conversation? No, 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 no. I'm going to talk about baby killing because she's already legitimized the phrase. She said, I would never do that. I would never kill a baby. And then she said, why? She said, I wouldn't want anything bad to come back on me, kind of like a karma thing. What goes around comes around. Now, I don't know about you, but I think that's kind of an odd reason not to kill a baby. I'm not going to kill any. You never know what's going to happen to you when you kill babies. Maybe it's just a good idea not to kill babies. But I didn't take that tack. Instead, I said, well, maybe you won't kill babies, but maybe we should stop other people from killing babies. And she said, well, I think people should have a choice. Now, what is the choice we're talking about here? By her own admission, the choice to kill babies, right? And so I asked her that. You mean they should have a choice to kill babies? And she said, well, I think all things should be taken into consideration. I said, okay, well, what would be a good consideration to make it okay to kill a baby? And she immediately said, incest. Now, notice what's going on here. She is trotting out all the pro-choice slogans, right? But she's not thinking about it because she's already identified abortion as baby killing, so all of the pro-choice slogans are now slogans in favor of baby killing explicitly. And it's starting to sound a little weird to me, but she doesn't get it because she's just using slogans. People do this all the time. And Christians do this all the time as well. Okay? So I wanted to get her off her stride a little bit. I'm asking questions. Finally, I said, let me see if I understand your view. If I had a 2-year-old that was standing next to me right now who had been conceived by incest, on your view, then I should be allowed to kill this baby. Now, this question stopped her in her tracks. And she thought about it for a moment, and then she said, well, I have mixed feelings about that. Now, she meant it as a concession. I said, I hope so, at least mixed, you know. She said it as a concession. But it got her thinking, and I noticed that the line is growing behind me, okay? So I realized that now I am interfering with her work product. And had I been of a different conviction, I might say, look it, folks, I haven't gotten to the gospel yet. Sit down, listen up, maybe you'll learn something. But I didn't do that. I realized that I'm a gardener. I do what I can. I put a stone in her shoe, and then I move on and trust the rest to the Lord. And that's what I did there. Now, I want you to notice something about that conversation. In that conversation, I asked 9 different questions. I used questions to begin the conversation, to gather information from her. I used questions to exploit what I thought was a weakness I saw in her view, her inconsistency. I also tried to show the natural consequences of her view. On her view, I should be allowed to kill this little child who had been conceived by incest. And, well, I like to say she was doing all the work because I wasn't doing any work. I was relaxed. But it turns out she wasn't doing any work either. She was relaxed. I was relaxed. There was no lines drawn in the sand. There's no dukes up. We weren't fighting each other. This is the power of using a tactical approach. This is exactly the way I want it. Now, at Stand to Reason, we have lots of different tactics. We have tactics with names like Steamroller and Taking the Roof Off and Just the Facts, Ma'am, and Suicide. But there's one tactic that really is the core of the game plan. It's the best tactic that I've ever used. It can be used with other tactics, but it's the easiest tactic imaginable to stop a detractor in their tracks, to turn the tables, to get them thinking, and to put you in the driver's seat of the conversation. And remember, that's the place we want to be when we talk about tactics. We want to be in the driver's seat. And the tactic has a name, and the name is Columbo. Named after the...
You watched it today at lunch? Sweet. You had no idea you were being equipped to share the gospel when you watched that, did you? So we'll look at the Columbo tactic next week. It's actually really good. It's good information. So right off the bat, what do you think bugged me? No, you said it. Okay, you didn't hear him. So let's see if you had the same thing, because we heard him. Okay, that's fair. Not what I was thinking about, but that was fair. He is let's see, what would be the way to say it? If you know him, I think you would be you would feel safe to say that that's assumed. So he didn't talk about it yet. That's totally legit. He should talk about that. And I haven't watched all the sessions. So I don't know if he gets into the theological side of the tactic. Okay. For our purposes, he's really just sharing nuts and bolts. But certainly, absolutely, led by the Spirit, 100%. 100%. That always has to be true, no matter what tactic you're using, because the Spirit needs to tell you what tactic to use, for one thing, and then how to use it, because it's not always the same. So, but did anybody else?
Well, he said that these decisions can't happen fast, and that,
Yeah,
I mean,
yeah. And that's what you said, right? Yeah,
and all that. And
yeah.
that happens many times.
So here's my thing about the gardener and the harvest. Is that where you were?
Well, I was going to say, like, if you're in that conversation and you have a chance, you don't necessarily have to drop the whole spiel on it, but at the same time, if you have a chance to even introduce the idea of
Yeah.
like, that core,
Yeah.
look, this isn't what I believe because I
Is that where you were? That is exactly what bothers me.
I mean, I think on a case-by-case basis, you're either, like, when I talk to you right now.
I'm whatever the Lord needs me to be in that moment.
Sure,
I need to
that's
walk around
right.
and
You
go,
might
I
be
am
both.
only a gardener.
That's it.
I will just occasionally
But you
talk in
shouldn't
this
go
way.
Exactly.
Conversation.
You should not assume that you're only a gardener. Okay, James?
See, I have a problem with you know, just using tactics and not even mentioning the gospel because, Paul came to preach Christ and Christ crucified. He didn't come to preach tactics.
Okay, that's a valid point too. Here's what I'll say about that. In that specific scenario that he used with the witch, okay, she is a checkout girl in a line at a store. He does not have the right to stand there for 30 minutes and get to the gospel. He is introducing the concept of the pebble in the shoe because he knows that she might see James next. And she's already thinking about her position, and maybe her thoughts are being challenged by what happened in that conversation. So the Spirit leads her to you, and you get to share the gospel. That's his thought process. And here's what's really legit about that. Take it as far as you can. That's the thing. We don't control the scenario, especially somebody we don't know, some random person that we just have the opportunity to start a conversation with. We're not in control of how much time they're going to give us, right? And so if he's standing there in that line and here's this girl with a pentagram on her necklace, unless the Spirit tells you to do this, it's hard to see it being very fruitful to go, hey, that's occultish, and that means you're lost and you're going to hell. Do you know Jesus? I'm not saying that would never be something the Spirit would tell you to do. I'm not saying that at all. But most of the time, that is somebody that is so far away that you need to gauge where they are. So that's why he asked the question, does that have any significance to you? Because a lot of people will wear that, doesn't actually mean anything to them. Just like a lot of people wear a cross, doesn't mean anything to them. That's a great conversation starter. You see somebody wear a cross? Hey, that's a cross. I'm a Christian. Is that what it means to you? Find out if there's any meaning behind it at all. When he asked her, she said, yeah, there's meaning to it. It means this and this. And like she was legitimately in on the occult concept. So about the best he can do in that scenario. Because like he said, he looks behind him, there's a line of people. About the best he can do is challenge something in what she shares with him. That because she sounds intelligent, right? But she's not stupid. And he led her to a point of challenging her own view of abortion.
It'll get her thinking about her view and
right.
how it's wrong down the road.
Exactly. That's the concept of the pebble in the shoe. You ever had a stone in your shoe? You can't ignore it, right? Eventually you're going to do something about it because you want that to stop because the pain never stops if there's a pebble in your shoe. And so now, at least she knows there's something that she has said she believes that all of a sudden she knows, that might not make sense. And that can be one brick in a wall that when it gets knocked out of place, the whole wall starts to crumble. Okay? That's the concept of gardening. You get a chance to knock a brick out of somebody's wall, somebody's false religion wall. You take that chance. And if they were sitting in a park instead, he would have continued the conversation as long as she was willing to sit there. Right? Exactly. Couldn't say it better. Sound like amen to me. I appreciate it.
Well, I think the idea of tactics is important because there are so many people, for whatever reason, that have a lot of defenses built up.
Mm-hmm.
When you think about Christianity, so many people have a reason that they have just walled themselves off. So
Exactly.
the idea is not to come in swinging. Like if you just lead with the gospel, a lot of people, it's not even going to faze them. Right?
Yeah.
They've heard it 1,000 times. So it's just getting people to question, or at least approach their own beliefs with an eye for, from your point of view. I think that's the biggest thing with tactics is just getting people to sort of engage at all.
Get them to start thinking.
Right? Get them to think anything. Get them to engage.
Because here's what you find. You find this in the church.
Yeah.
Listen, you find people in the church who are just on autopilot.
Yeah.
They know the phrases. Jesus saves, Jesus died for the sins of the world. You got to have Jesus. But you try to engage them on it, they can't have a conversation because all they've got are the phrases. And abortion is just happens to be one great example of where most of the people who support it only have some phrases that they've heard over and over and over. And if you ask them about the phrase, they can't really go any deeper. And it's important to make sure they know they can't go any deeper. Oh, what do I believe? Why do I believe that? This guy just asked me a question I can't answer. You know? So that's the value of it. Okay. Here's a great point that he made. This stuff, this content, is he called it a bridge from content to conversation. Okay, we've been working on content for a long time now. Okay, you guys are pretty solid on content, but this is the bridge for you to get that moved into actual conversation. Okay, so this is not so much about what information to share in your conversation. This is about how to be in the driver's seat of the conversation so you can steer it to the place where you can introduce the content. Okay? This is not meant to be a gospel presentation course. Okay? We've been talking about that for a long time. This is the preliminary step on conversation starter. And we've talked about that some too. This is just a little more in depth on having a tactic for, he's going to give us techniques depending on what response you get from the other person. There are going to be different techniques, and with the help of the Spirit, you'll be able to identify which one might be fruitful in that situation. Okay? That's what this is for.
So one thing that I really love about the conversations that you and Michael have been having that I feel like I didn't see from him in this is really that spirit of we're one beggar telling another beggar where to get a meal. Like there's not, I don't know, Mary, did you get that too? You're always touchy-feely like I am. I just wanted you to like radiate love in this process at all, and it was more like, I'm going to win this argument. Oh, and by the way, you're going to get Jesus in it. And that was my first exposure to him, so I could have read it totally wrong.
Yeah. I think you just don't know him well enough.
Okay, he chafed me.
That's not an unfair. That's not an unfair thought. It goes along with what James was saying.
Yeah, it was very
Like, it bothers James that he didn't mention Jesus yet.
Yeah.
Okay, and I totally get that. That's just not what this course is about. This course is about how to get the conversation to Jesus. Okay, and if you're standing in line at the checkout, you may not be able to do it that way. Maybe your job that day is to just get their mind in gear.
I like the point of looking at what's in front of you.
Mhm.
Like somebody's got a cross tattoo. Why do you have that?
Absolutely.
Same thing. Like all these things, all these clues to how
Mhm.
people are
Clues.
right there.
That's it. It's about paying attention. It's not about going in with a script. It's about going in with a concept. And the concept is always, I need to learn something about this person so I can engage with them in a conversation they will be willing to have. But because here, and I'll get to you in a second, one of the phrases that he used that I like is, this is about finesse, not coercion. And it's about managing, not manipulating. You know, I like how he described it. He said at the end of that conversation, neither one of us had been working hard. It was just a conversation. But he still accomplished something.
I was going to add, like that's the conversation starter of like noticing, something that points like a necklace or a tattoo.
Mm-hmm.
But he said, listening still puts you in the driver's seat.
Yeah.
So you're still, in charge of I wouldn't say in charge, but of the conversation going, but listening instead of talking.
Listening and reacting to what they say
Right.
it makes them allow you to be in the driver's seat of the conversation.
You let them lead, but then you maneuver it to where you want to take it.
That's right.
To make them see how they're wrong, or make them see something that you want them to see.
Nobody's losing. And there's no reason for them to feel defensive.
Right.
In
'cause a lot of
that
times if
situation,
you
you just made her
think.
Yeah.
If you just go straight at their ideological position, most people will just give you the slogan and that's it. There's
That's
no
right.
conversation.
That's right.
They just have that response because
Yeah.
people don't like to challenge their own systems, right? That's a hard process. And that's why I like the whole, you call it the Socratic method or the Colombo method, but the idea is most people given a little bit of time to just talk about their own belief systems will struggle getting past the shallowest level.
This
And
is
that
how
is how they
This is
start
how I
to
got
engage.
saved.
Yeah.
It just didn't involve anybody else. It was just the Spirit in me. While I'm teaching Sunday school at a Baptist church, I realize I don't know I can't tell somebody why Jesus had to die for me. Nobody challenged me on that. I'm hanging out with a pastor that obviously knows Jesus, like personally, and nobody ever even talked to me about that. I grew up in church. Nobody ever talked to me about that. I knew he had something I didn't have. I, on my own, started questioning my theology. And this is just that. This is just helping somebody that's not even on their radar yet. That's all it is. Open-ended, non-threatening questions. Casual, nice. Okay, what were the 3 words that he used?
Knowledgeable, nice.
Knowledgeable,
Character.
knowledge, wisdom.
Yeah, you have to have the knowledge base, okay, to some extent. You have to be wise in how you use that in the conversation, and then you need to represent a godly character so that you're not immediately seen as a hypocrite, because that wipes away everything that you just said. Okay? If you're talking to somebody about the peace of Jesus and they say something that makes you angry and you start yelling at them, you have lost, my friend. The devil has won that one. What were I'm looking for? I know I made a note on this. There were 3 words that he used. Oh, be smart, be nice, be tactful. And again, Spirit-led. That should be on that list. Okay? Because it's not enough to force your knowledge in just because you know it. The tactical part, really, of that, the wisdom part of that is allowing the Spirit to take the tools in your toolbox and use them through you. Right? Listen and react to their thoughts. Look for those slogans that they're going to throw out. You know, and if it's an issue like abortion, it's going to be, well, what about incest and rape? That's always, in every single one of those conversations, that's going to come up. Okay? There are tools out there for that. He actually used one that we've run into before with this other guy. He calls it trot out the 2-year-old.
Yeah.
He was like, okay, if your logic is actually legitimate, then is there any difference between that baby in the womb and a 2-year-old? If it really is about financial distress and somebody can't afford to raise a baby, and that's why killing the baby is okay, shouldn't that be true too as well? And that's what he did there. And I like that. Look for those slogans. Sometimes the slogan will be something against Christianity. Okay, it'll be a negative slogan against Christianity. So you need to be ready not to react, to that. You ask another question. What makes you say that? Get them to define their own position. That is so powerful.
One of the things we heard at the conference there was sometimes people only repeat what they've heard and they can't define it anyway.
That's right. That's right.
And having an answer for stuff like the question of evil, right?
Mm-hmm.
The question of suffering, like just a simple one for that. You
Right.
get past like 80% of people.
That one will almost always come.
Yeah.
Almost
Yeah.
always.
And I think in that conversation, I don't even think he was gardening. I think he literally just dropped the seed for somebody else to come
Yeah.
drop soil over it and garden, and then somebody else harvest. Like he literally just put a seed, planted a seed that could take root and grow in her mind.
Yep.
And her realize.
Absolutely. Carefully selected questions that get inoffensive answers. That's what you're looking for. You're not looking to start a fight. You're not looking to win an argument. That's not what witnessing is about. And the more conversational it can be, the better. People can sniff out an evangelism script like that, and man, they stop listening 10 seconds in. How do I get out of this conversation? Is all they're thinking. Because they went to church and some preacher handed them a pamphlet and told them what to say to me. They don't care about me. They don't want to know anything about me. They're trying to fill out a quota. They're trying to go back and say, hey, I shared the gospel 10 times this week. They're like little kids. Little kids are smart, right? Lost people are smart in the same way. They can sniff out a scheme. Okay? It's not a scheme. Again, it's not about manipulation. Honest conversation. And in honest conversation, you have to listen. How do you describe it? In his book, he describes it as, think of it as more of a one-on-one basketball game than a chess game. In chess, somebody makes a move, and everybody sits around and looks for a while and decides what's next, and the guy makes a move. In one-on-one basketball, you were constantly reacting to what the other person's doing. And you can come in with an idea of what you want to do. But if what they're doing doesn't match up with your defense, you got to change your defense.
You're not countering, you're reacting.
That's right. That's right. And that is way less aggressive. It really is. It shows respect to the other person. And that's something Christians don't always do. They don't always show respect to the people they're trying to witness to. We've got to be careful with that. We've got to be really careful with that. So, any other thoughts? Randy?
I think the only other thing that caught my ear was he mentioned bringing people to Christianity. I think he said it like 3 different times. And what about bringing people to Jesus?
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah, that's fair. That's fair. Tactical approach keeps either of you from having to work hard. When he said that reminded me of, take my yoke upon you. My yoke is easy, my burden is light. You'll find the rest for your souls. If you're yoked to Jesus, you're going to be doing work. But in that work, you're going to be at peace and restful. Your soul's going to be calm. If it's not working that way, we're doing it wrong. If evangelism is we're doing it wrong. We're not representing Jesus. Jesus never did it that way. Never. We should be heartbroken, but never aggressive. Right? Never aggressive. Okay. We'll move on and do some more of that next week. We'll get into the Columbo tactic, which is the Socratic method, like you just said. So,
Less pointed.
If you get a chance to watch some Columbo episodes this week, maybe they'll prepare you better for next week. All right. Thank you, Lord, for this conversation. Thank you for this information. Thank you for equipping us to go out and do the work that you have called us to do. May we be good representatives of you. The truth is we are your ambassadors, not your generals. We are meant to be diplomatic in every situation where it is possible to be so. We're not meant really to win battles so much with other people. We don't wrestle against flesh and blood. So we want to win battles against the enemy, and we do that by being involved in diplomacy towards lost people, so that we can be the vessel that you use to win them to truth and away from the enemy whose head you have already crushed. So, thank you, Lord, for tonight. Thank you for the conversation. Help us to ruminate on this as we go through the week and start looking for opportunities to apply these things. And may you be glorified in all this. In Jesus' name, God's people said. All right, if you're watching online, you have the link to the Zoom meeting that begins, the prayer meeting that begins immediately. If not, we'll see you Sunday. But until then, love God, love everybody else. All right, prayer meeting.